Hello, everyone. My youngest son, Matthew, will be completing his graduate studies soon, and I thought I would make him a model of what else? The Matthew, the first, well, let's call it the first documented European ship to land in North America in 1497. In a similar vein, a few years ago, I built the Santa Maria for my oldest son, Christopher. Now, I don't have a lot of time. He'll be finishing his master's soon, and he has a job lined up in Europe, so I needed to work fast. And I also wanted to make this small just in case he wanted to take it with him for the next few years in Europe. So I decided to go with a 3D resin hull and 1/96 in terms of scale. Now, to design a ship in 3D, you have to start with plans. And here are the plans for the replica ship in Bonavista, Newfoundland. 45 pages of plans by LP Corps of Davis Engineering. And I imported these lines drawings into Fusion 360, carefully traced over the lines, kept adding features, and after a lot of fidgety work, rendered it into a 3D graphic. Now, there was a bit of confusion here because I was looking at these plans and pictures of the replica Matthew in Bristol. It wasn't until just a few weeks ago that I finally realized that there are two Matthew replicas. These are the plans for the replica in Bonaventure, Newfoundland. As I progressed through the design, I cherry-picked some details from the Bristol replica. At the end of the 3D design, you need to export a file that's called an STL. And that gets imported into Slicer software, which then prepares it by adding supports and slicing it into layers that could be fed to a resin printer. And at the end of that process, you end up with a physical hull. And here you can see it's about 13 centimeters. Now I began pushing the limits of what I could add to the model and still print successfully. You can see that I was able to add many details and the railings. And just for your information, the cost of printing these is between like 75 and 90 cents of resin, not counting cleanup. Now, I have to admit there are some glaring errors in this model, mostly because some of the confusion with the plans and with some liberties I took in the interest of getting this completed. I also had difficulty with adding some features using the software, namely horizontal rubbing streaks. Now, with the magic of technology and time-lapse camera in the printer, we can reduce 9.5 hours to 21 seconds. Still pushing the limits of resin, I decided to print the crow's nest, two-part anchors, rudder and tiller, and the various blocks with through holes, and mast coats. I added styrene strips to fill in the rubbing strikes that I couldn't add digitally. Using an airbrush, I primed the hull and did some pre-shading to accentuate the details. Reddish brown seemed to match the color of the hulls on the replicas, and I used a cream color for the decks. I later gave the entire model a gray wash to make it look weathered. All the paints I'm using are model acrylics. I liked the colors on the Bristol Matthew, so I added this splash of green using a Sharpie acrylic brush marker. With just one pass with the brush, I was able to cover the brown. I forgot to add the numerous cleats. The cleats were only shown on one plan, and I didn't remember to add them to the digital design. However, dimension styrene strips and CA glue worked out very well, and these will end up being hand painted. Hold on to your hats. There will be some wood in this model. I'm making the masts and spars out of birch. My fly tying experience is paying off as I wrap 6/0 thread for molding. Tiny dollar store hobby clothespins made perfect clamps as the PVA glue dried on the thread. I don't know how well all these blocks will work, but here's my proof of concept for rigging the deadeyes. For this test, I just grabbed a spool of thread nearby for lanyards, but I will be using much thinner thread on the model. Again, I'll be raiding my fly tying supplies to make chain plates from extra fine wire wrapped around the deadeyes and twisted to simulate the chain plates. I will at least do the standing rigging with these blocks, and I'll see how my nerves are holding up when it comes time to do the running rigging. And with that, here is a dry fit of the mast, main mast. Are there any questions?